So much of sport, we're told, Trevor Sinclair, you've done it, we haven't, very much in the mind, it's all mental. Coming up, we're going to be speaking to Mark Bowden, sporting mental performance consultant. And of course, he's been working at Liverpool of late. What's he been doing there? We'll find out more. Jurgen Klopp has been raving about this man. It's Jim White and Simon Jordan live on Talk Sport. It's 5 minutes past 12 noon this Wednesday lunchtime. Hope you're good wherever you're listening all around the UK, and thank you for being with us right here on Talk Sport. Trevor Sinclair is with us, of course, and has been since 10 o'clock. Trevor, this is very much an area I think you want to contribute to in the discussion that's about to come up. This man is a sporting mental performance consultant. These people so much part these days of top sport. It's good afternoon to Mark Bowden. Mark, how are you?
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Jim. Great to be on the show.
Mate, we're delighted to have you working on the psychology of the mind and discussing how mental adjustments can give you an edge in sport. Because, Trevor, you played at the very highest level. What you want is that edge that will get you that bit of superiority over your opponent. So Mark, as a sporting mental performance consultant, tell us what that involves.
In terms of what I do, it's very, very different in terms of what might have gone on in the past. I think, we often talk about mental resilience, mindset, etc. And really, I think they're very important things, but they dilute down what is absolutely possible within this side of the game. I mean, what I actually do is I work with players to give them a practical understanding of how their brain works from a football performance perspective. And then from that, we can get them knowing exactly what to do to get the right parts of the brain in control to ensure that they have the best games they can possibly have. And that is exactly what I do. So it's when we talk about the extra 1%, the extra 2% that this sort of things can give you, what we're talking about here is the brain. And that brain is 100% responsible for what every player does on and off the pitch. So, forget that 1 or 2%. And if you look at sports science departments within these big clubs, the elite clubs right now, they're spending millions on bloods, oxygen levels, getting that body working as brilliant as it possibly could, which is spot on, absolutely needs to be done.
Yeah.
But what about that control center, the brain that is responsible for everything, and that one thing that will pull down a player's performance as quickly as anything?
Fascinating. So working on the brain, but basically, does it come down to getting that message of motivation over to the player, which sparks that message in his brain, and he goes out and does what you suggest?
It's a lot more than that. So it's about working with that individual, getting them thinking the right way, focusing on the right things, moving the right way, doing the right thing. Because what we actually know from doing these things, rather than just giving us motivation, rather than just confidence, what it's actually doing is it's actually sending blood and electrical signals to the right parts of the brain that we want to have in control. And it's also releasing chemical responses in the body and the brain that are either going to be great for our performances or terrible for our performances. So, for example, if you're sending it to the wrong place and the wrong parts of the brain, your thinking is going to deteriorate, your decision making is going to deteriorate, things such as your motor functions, your ability to shoot and pass, that is going to be completely off. Peripheral vision, so seeing the runs of your opposition, seeing the runs of your teammates, that's going to fall apart as well. So, it is everything within a game. You get this right, it works. You get it wrong, and you're in big trouble.
Wow. You're identifying with this, Trevor?
I wrote down a few things. Peripheral vision, I think for me, that was always playing with your head up. Motor functions, that's SAQ, going through all the motor skills that you need for your position. I think training at a high quality diffuses fear and gains confidence, so that fear or that trepidation going into games, it diminishes. I think the brain, I always say to my players, the brain is your most valuable asset on the pitch. Use your brain, you can save yourself a lot of running and things. Obviously, you need to know your role in the team. So that's about detail, what details involved in your role in the team. I think the biggest thing for me where I've used sports psychology is when it's recovery. Either coming back from an injury, or coming back from some kind of trauma where you've almost forgotten some skills that you had, to get yourself back up to that kind of performance, so that you can put a good match performance in, and that's where I've used sports psychology. But again, all of it comes down to the performance on a Saturday or Tuesday or Monday or whatever it is these days. But
yeah,
it's intriguing to hear you say about the brain and stimulating that. And how do you do that, Mark?
It's all around the thoughts, the focus, even like the way that we operate, the way that we're moving on the football pitch, all of these things. So, if you think of like an animal has a one-way system. So the brain will make sure that what we do on a day-to-day basis, or what an animal does on a day-to-day basis, is exactly what the brain wants it to do. But if anything happens in someone's game, the brain will tell the body and the thinking what to do. But what we can do as human beings, because we have much more advanced brains, is we can direct what we think. We can direct what we focus upon, and we can then direct that physiology of what we move. And then that has that two-way, like I said, it goes back to the brain then and has an enormous impact upon which parts of the brain are actually in control.
Is it Mark centering on streamlining thinking and managing emotional response to it?
Yeah. The thinking is a massive part of it. And when we talk about emotions, we're always talking about things, aren't we? That every time you hear about a player, you're talking about his confidence, his self-belief, all the emotions that are going on inside the game. But what we forget about is it's a lot more than just the emotion side. It is actually having that impact upon the brain itself. So yeah, a big part of it will be the thinking and the focus. But it's a lot more than that. It is, again, like I said, it's the movement in our body, the way that our posture, the way that we're conducting ourselves, and that's extremely important. And it is, for me, it's the next big thing in the game, and it's something that should have occurred a long, long time ago. For example, if you take someone like, the one that really always comes to mind for me at the moment is you take someone like Alexis Sanchez. When he went to Manchester United, his ability, absolutely unquestionable, absolutely superb. And we almost forget about how brilliant he was when he was at Arsenal. He moved from Arsenal, absolutely almost, world-class player. Now, his ability did not go down overnight. His ability was, like I said, it's unquestionable. But what happened with him is he lost what was going on inside his brain, and he wasn't able to perform. So, and I will absolutely say, if I was working with Alexis Sanchez at that time, which I wasn't, but if I was, he would have been an absolute success at Manchester United, and he would have done absolutely brilliant things. But not because, I would have changed his ability, but I would have got him to perform to the ability that he knows that he should have been.
By doing what, Mark? What would you have done? What would you have done to save Sanchez from being a flop at United, which is what he was?
Yeah, there's tons and tons of different things that we could have done with him. But the big thing for him is he's gone to a club where there's this fear factor. And he's out of his comfort zone. Now, the brain does not like change. Well, that's a big one. The brain doesn't like change. So if we're doing something different, our brain is automatically on high alert. Now, when we're on high alert, we're in that bad part of the brain. And that is when everything starts deteriorating. So a big thing at this moment in time, when clubs are investing in players, they're not really investing in players, they're gambling in it, because if they get a player in, they just want the physiological side or the body performing like it should, and they don't look at helping a player to manage his thought processes, to manage what he's focusing on, and everything else that goes around that. If he doesn't do that, then we're going to succumb to more players like Alexis Sanchez.
The cynics will say, Mark, that Sanchez, as a top pro, should have raised his game himself.
Yeah, and you'll hear that all the time. For some reason, because a player is at an elite level, because a player is earning 100, 200 or more money, £1,000 a week, they should be these superheroes that don't get impacted by this, that don't get, they don't have any issues with it. But the fact is, a footballer, a normal person, we do not get born with a user guide to how our brain operates. And Alexis, you can't just have that knowledge of what goes on. For example, you've got Lionel Messi, Ronaldo. They have kind of stumbled in. They're fantastic at what they do, but they have this mindset and this way of operating that they stumbled into. But everybody knows a player. And I mean, I'm sure Trevor will know tons of players that had that ability that should have been absolutely brilliant, but they didn't have that user manual to how their brain operated.
Okay.
And they didn't become the players they should have been.
How do players, Mark, and I'm not talking about Liverpool players specifically here, but how do players receive this information from you and digest it and use it to help them?
How do they? So, in terms of what?
Their initial, like, when you start explaining different things and different thought patterns and how they can stimulate their brain, how do they receive it initially? Because for me,
what's their reaction?
Yeah, it seems quite mind-boggling what you're saying.
I agree, Trevor. How do they react and how do they manifest that improvement that you're looking for?
Yeah, so it's quite a simple process. So obviously I've kind of hit you with a ton of things here right now, but when I sit down and I work with a player, the first session that we'll do, we'll go into it, but you don't need to be a neuroscientist to have that practical understanding of their brain. And what I do is give that the understanding to them. And every single player that I work with is able to get that grasp, that understanding of what's going on. And it is a simple process of just knowing that if you think certain things, if you do certain things, and if you act in a certain way, you're sending those blood signals to the wrong part of the brain.
Is it steeped in things like NLP and CBT, that neuro-linguistic programming? Is that part of the thinking behind it, Mark?
Stop showing off. He's showing off, Mark. On you go.
I like it. Yeah, so there is NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. There's all kinds of disciplines that I bring to the table. So
what is that, Mark? Explain to Trevor and me.
Positive reformation.
All right.
Yeah. So psychotherapy, psychology, solution-focused therapy. But also, if you look, my background, I used to be a covert operative, leading operations in the field for the Serious Organised Crime Agency, the National Crime Agency. So instantly, when I sit down and I work with a player, having that background, we're both in alpha jobs. So, football is very much an alpha profession. What I used to do was very much an alpha profession. And what we used to actually do, so being deployed in the field and having teams to work with, I'm having to perform to very, very high levels in highly pressurized environments, which is exactly what is happening with a footballer.
Wow. Mark, listen, you've left us a lot to think about. I think Trevor and I might recognize your voice from your previous work. I'm joking. Thank you so much for joining us, my friend.
Well done, Mark.
Amazing
stuff.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Mark Bowden, the sporting mental performance consultant. You were showing off there, weren't you?
Interesting.
You didn't have
it wasn't. Yes, I do. I owned a business that used neuro-linguistic programming, so wind your neck in.
I can't even say that.
The organised crime bit, old Jim went, hang on, I've seen him before.
Well, all I was thinking of was Michael Jordan in Space Jam. He's got amazing talent and all of a sudden, I think he plays a putt and he loses all his ability. That was almost what happened to
Interesting stuff, though. I heard things about Sanchez going to Man United. He goes into the first training session, doesn't fancy it. And the mindset changes.
That's right.
It is the mind. As a leading athlete, you'll know the mind drives everything.